Kal Kadosh, Boker Or, Shavua Tov. This is Masechet Batra Daf Yomi, Kuv Gimel Amud Aleph. We're 103A1, but we're going to start on 102B, the new chapter. Perek Shavi, the seventh chapter, the new Mishnah. Omer lechavero. If a person is going to come and he's going to say to his friend, Bet Ku Rafar Ani Mochelecha, I'm going to sell you a Bet Ku Avafar. Remember, this is a measurement Avafar, which is fitting for planting. Vayusham Nikaim. And they had like small holes. Amukim asrat tfachim, which were depth of 10 tfachim. Or slaim guinas tfachim, or slaim, which were 10 tfachim. Ena nimdadinima, they're not going to be measured with it. Pachom mikam, if it's going to be less than that, nimdadinima, they are going to be measured with it. V'im amar lo, now if he told him, kibet kurafara, right, like a bet kurafar, afilu ayu sham nekaim amukim yoter masrat tfachim, even if it's going to be amukim yoter masrat tfachim, right, less than 10 tfachim, or slaim goim yoter masrat tfachim, or stones which are above 10 tfachim, they are going to be measured with it. Okay? So basically, if it's going to be 10 tfachim depth or height, it's a separate entity. But if it's less, it's all considered together, and then that's it. Okay? Fine, let's go. Tanan Hatam, says the Gemara. We learned over there in the Mishnah, Magdish Sadeu, Bishat Yovel. If you're going to consecrate your field during the time of Yovel, okay, that means basically when Yovel is actually acting, right? It's in place. You're going to give to the Gizvar of the Hekdesh, you're going to give him Chomer Seorim, that means 50 shekel kesef. You're going to give him 50 shekel kesef for every Bet Zera of Chomer Seorim, meaning that a certain amount of space, you're going to give him 50 kesef. What happens if you have these holes ditches, or ditches, or if you want to call it the mounts on the top for 10 tfachim, right? 103A1 on the top, and nimdadinima. They're not going to be measured with it. But if it's going to be less than it, nimdadinima, it's going to be measured with it. Okay? So basically, it's like very simple. It's like every square meter, you're going to pay me a certain amount. That's to get out of the Ekdesh, right? That's what we're talking about now. So says the Gemara, V'amai, why are you going to tell me that if it's going to be, right, 10 tfachim of a ditch, it's not going to be redeemed in the normal? So just make it that it's considered that it's separate. Now, meaning that when you're going to consecrate it, it should be considered consecrated, Hekdesh benifrad. Now, v'chi teiman, if you're going to tell me, Kevin Deloavi bet kur, since it's not bet kur, lokachi, it does not become holy. Ken zeloni kadosh. But Tanya, we learned sadeh. What does it mean sadeh? Matamuluma, what does the sadeh come to teach you? It says v'imi gaol yigalata sadeh hamagdish oto. What does it come to teach you? The sadeh. The fish שנאמר זה מוכר סעודים ב50 שקל כסף, אלא שהקדיש בניין הזה מניין לרבות לתך וחצי. We only talked about a bet kur. That means, for example, let's say an acre of land. Whoever told you that even if it's half an acre, if it's going to be a quarter of an acre, it's going to be whatever it is. How do we know that? Letech is half of a kur. Yeah, or chetzi letech, se'at, tirka, v'chetzi tirka. How do you know? Hadmor sadeh. Sadeh is mikom makom, any size. Any size that it's going to be a sadeh, is a gadol, it's proportionally, right? It doesn't matter whether it's big or small. You're going to have to do it proportionally according to the 50 shekel kesef for the bet kul. Okay, so for example, if it's half of a bet kul, so 25 shekel kesef. It's going to be a quarter, it's going to be 12 and a half. If it's going to, you understand? Meaning you go proportionally.
Who is like an acre?
Yes, whatever. It's a bet kul.
Why the clefs more than 10 tefachim are not subject to the 50 shekel?
Amar Rav Ukva bar Chama, says Rav Ukva bar Chama. Hacha here b'nekaim meleim mayim eskinam utama nekaim which are full of water. Tela b'nezriya ninu, but they're not considered part of, right, b'nezriya. But daikanami diktani, and we also learned the dumya dislaim shmamina. So says the Gemara, ihachi, if so afilu pachot mikanami. Even if it's going to be less, it's going to be the same thing. Okay. So says the Gemara, hanau nagane de ara mikru. Those are called bikue karka. Right? The shidre de ara, and it's going to be considered shidre ara mikro. So it's not considered, meaning like this. There's going to be these like ditches. One of them are called bikue karka, and therefore, if they're going to be very, very small, right? They're very small. So then that's fine. That's one thing. The other ones are called like big, like bigger pieces of land. So therefore, he comes and he says, in such a fashion, it's going to be two different concepts. Okay. So he comes and he says like this. So he says, Hachamai, what's halacha here? Papa says, Afal pi she'emelin mayim, even if it's not going to be full of water. My time what's reasoning. En adam rotzeh she'iten ma'otav b'makom echad v'yiru lo k'shtam mekom. You don't want to pay for something, and it looks like 2 or 3 different places. Meaning, when you're investing in a property, you want it to be in one property, not that it looks like you've got one property here, one property there, one property there, because this one has a ditch or the other one has a a mount or the. I thought it's the same thing. So Matkif Ravina comes and he asks, "V'adom yad slaim ktani." I thought we learned it like slaim. Maslaim delav ben ezriyaninu. Just like slaim is not going to be ben ezriyah. So to here it's not ben ezriyah. Meaning here you can plant, and if you can plant, that's it. So he says no. Kiktani dumya dislaim b'pachom mikam. We're talking about that it's going to be less, and in such a case where it's going to be less, so therefore obviously you would be able to plant. Okay, the 2 dots. Pachom mikan min nadinema. We said if it's going to be less, then it's going to be measured with it. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says of Yitzchak Terashim, the slaim that they said is betar ba'at kabin. We're talking about 4 kabin. So Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama says Rav Ukva Bar Chama, vehu shemuvlaim b'chameshet kabin. That's going to be if it's absorbed in the 5 kabin. Okay, Rav Chia Bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Chia Bar Abba comes and he says the name of Rabbi Yochanan, vehu shemuvlaim beruba shel hasadeh. But that's only if it's going to be absorbed in the majority of the field. So by Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, ruban mimiuta umiyata beruba ma'u. What happens if you have the majority of the 4 kavin in the slaim, which are going to be in the minority of the 16 amot of the majority of the field, or you have the other way around? So he comes and he says, "Take, we don't have an answer in such a case." Okay, by Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah is now going to ask the following question: 103b. Okay, Keshir Mahu. What happens if you have the stones, but the stones are like a necklace, a bracelet? You have the picture over there on the bottom. Look at the bottom. Look at the picture. Right? It's like a bracelet, right? Or kashura. It's like a straight line. That's the next picture. Okay? Or like itztadinin, right? Which is like the itztadinin. You have the next picture over there, right? Or like akalton, right? So basically you have the different pictures there. What is the halacha in such a case? Meaning you have the stones, but they're just in such a form, kemo tzamid, right? Kemo, right? The shura is a shura, a straight line, right? Or all these, what's halacha? Take, we don't have an answer in all these cases. Okay? Because at the end of the day, since it was misudan in such a case, we're not sure, is it really that you makpid in such a thing or not?
It was teku because they're not sure.
Yes, whenever we have a teku.
They did back then?
No. Teku just means that they don't have the answer. That was already then. They don't have an answer. So we for sure don't have an answer, but they don't have an answer. Yeah, so we don't know.
Doesn't this have to do with money?
Now it says, Tana, we learned in a Braita. Ima yasela yechidi. What happens if you have one stone beside the border? Afilu kolshu, even a little bit, and imdadidma. It's not going to be measured with it. The same thing, the same lacha. Even if the stone was going to be close on the inner side, also it's not going to be measured with it. So by Rav Papa, what happens if now mufsak afar benatayim? There's a pasek, right? There's a sek of afar in between, which means that there's going to be earth, right? Less than 3 tfachim between the sela and the border. So you have the stone, but the stone, there's going to be 3 tfachim. 3 tfachim is every 8 centimeters is a tefach. So it's 3 times 8, 24 centimeters between, right, between one and the other. So what's halacha? So he says teku. We don't have an answer. So by Ravashi, says what happens if on the bottom you do have earth, but there's only stone on the top of the earth, right? Or afar milmala v'tzulma milmata. Ma, what's halacha? Teku. We don't have an answer. Okay, fine. Mishnah on Kuf Gimel Amud Bet. Bet kura afar ani mochelecha. Right? What happens if a person comes and he says bet kura afar ani mochelecha mida bechevel, which means I'm going to measure it. Right? Mida bechevel. Bechevel is like they used to take the rope, and the rope used to measure it. So pichet kolshu, even if it's going to be a little tiny bit less, yenakeh. He's going to come and he's going to have to deduct. Hotir, if you give a kolshu, also yachzir. Why? But since he said it's like measured. Is that meaning if I'm going to say kibet kura, like an acre of land, so it's like even if you point there, you know what happens the majority of the times when you used to buy hard drives, right? You're going to buy a terabyte of hard drive. How much was really on the hard drive? It wasn't a terabyte. It was always 960 something gigs or whatever, meaning that it wasn't the full amount. But it's like here. It's like if it's going to be like that, that's fine. But the second that he's going to come and he's going to say that it's going to be exactly that amount, it has to be exactly that amount. V'imamar, now if he's going to come and he's going to tell him hen chaser hen yeter, that it's going to be a little more or less. That's the concept, more or less. Yeah, pachot yoter. Afilu pichet rova leseah, even he's going to give a little bit less, which is going to be a rova of a kav for every single seah, or more, higio, it's going to be okay, right? But yoter mikanim, it's going to be more than this cheshbon. Yaseh cheshbon, you have to make the cheshbon and give it back. Mao machzilo, what does he give him back? Money. He doesn't give him back the land. He gives him back money. If he wants, he can give him back the land. So why do they say now give him back money? In order to be miyapeh the koach of the mocher, of the seller. Shim shiyer basyadeh bet yishakabin, as if he's going to leave over bet yishakabin uvagina bet chetziakav, like Rabbi Kiva bet rova machzilo tekaka. Then he's going to come and he has to give him back the land. Okay, so again, here we're talking about that the reason for the takana was in order to make sure that the purchaser is buying the karka, right, in order to have the better hand for the seller, that it shouldn't be by him like a small little tiny piece of land. You want to make sure that he's going to have the entire thing. Now, he's not going to just give back a little bit. He has to give back the entire amount. It's like what we learned. Do you remember we learned this to do with overcharging? We said that if you overcharge a little bit, it's okay. But the second that it gets to a certain amount, you have to give back the entire overcharging. You're not going to say, no, I'll just give back a little bit back. No. You have to give back the entire thing.